My wife's parents walked into our house unannounced and slid a manila envelope across the kitchen island like a gift. "Just sign," they said, then claimed I'd already signed months ago. The page had my name on it. The problem was, I knew I hadn't. My name is Ryan. I'm 38 years old, and I've learned the hard way that the most dangerous fights aren't always loud. Sometimes they happen in polite voices across a kitchen island, with someone sliding a document toward you like they're doing you a favor. I live in the suburbs outside Denver. I work in IT project management, nothing glamorous but stable. I'm the kind of guy who reads every line before I click I agree. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I've spent years watching people get burned by what they didn't bother to verify. I always thought that habit would protect me from scammers, shady contractors, maybe a bad car loan. I didn't expect it would become the one thing standing between my wife and me and being thrown out of our home by her own parents. My wife Elena and I have been married a little over 3 years. We met the unromantic modern way. Mutual friends, group events, a lot of "oh, you like that too" conversations. She's smart, steady, and kind in a way that makes you want to be better just by being around her. She works as a physical therapist, and she's good at it. The kind of person who remembers the little details patients mention once and brings them up weeks later. The first year we were together, I thought her parents were intense but manageable. Her mom, Diane, is the type who has a comment for everything. Not necessarily mean on the surface, just constant. If you're eating, she's watching how you hold the fork. If you're talking, she's looking for the opening to correct a word choice. Her dad, Mark, is quieter, but in a way that feels like he's keeping score. He doesn't argue much. He makes statements like verdicts. Together they had this polished suburban authority that could make you feel like you were 12 years old asking permission to stay out late. Elena warned me early, in her gentle way. My mom doesn't do well with boundaries, she told me once after her mother helpfully rearranged Elena's pantry during a visit. She thinks love means access. I laughed at the time. I thought it was just family stuff, annoying, sure, but nothing that could really threaten us. Then the housing situation changed everything. In late 2022, our rent jumped, like everyone else's. Our apartment complex sent a cheerful email about market adjustments, and suddenly we were looking at an extra $600 a month for the same 2-bedroom with the same thin walls and the same neighbor who practiced drums at 11 p.m. Elena and I talked about moving farther out, or downsizing. We even toured a couple of places. None of them felt right. That's when Diane and Mark presented their solution. They owned a small single-family home about 15 minutes from their place. It had belonged to Mark's aunt, and after she passed, they kept it as a rental property. It wasn't huge, but it was clean, in a good school district, and honestly, it felt like a step up from apartment life. They invited us over for dinner one Sunday and brought it up like it was a generous gift. "Why are you paying strangers?" Diane said, passing a basket of rolls like she was passing wisdom. "We have a perfectly good house sitting there. You two could live in it and actually save." Mark nodded. "We'd charge you less than market. Keep it in the family." Elena looked relieved. I felt cautious. I asked practical questions. What would the rent be? How would repairs be handled? Would there be a lease? Diane waved her hand. "Oh, we don't need to make it a big legal thing. We're family." Mark added, "We can put something simple in writing, just to keep it clear." Something simple in writing sounded reasonable to me. I'm not anti-family. I'm pro-clarity. A basic lease protects everybody. It sets expectations. But the way Diane said big legal thing made me uneasy. Like the very idea of documentation offended her. Still, we ran the numbers. Their offer was about $800 below what we would have paid anywhere else. Elena was excited. She kept saying things like, "This would finally let us get ahead, and we could pay off the last of my student loans faster." I agreed, with one internal rule: we don't do anything sloppy. We get a lease. We pay rent in a trackable way, and we keep boundaries no matter how family Diane wanted to make it. We moved in that winter. The house felt like a fresh start. I set up my home office in the spare room. Elena painted the kitchen a warmer color. For a while it was good. We settled into a routine. Work, dinner, small weekend projects, Netflix nights where we fell asleep before the end of the second episode. And then slowly, the invisible strings started tightening. At first it was little things. Diane would text Elena about stopping by and then show up 15 minutes later. Not asking, announcing. She'd bring groceries we didn't request, and then complain about what we didn't have in the fridge, like we were failing a test. Mark would drop by to check the furnace filter, and somehow always end up inspecting something else. One time he walked into the garage and stared at my tool shelf like he was evaluating a tenant for damages that hadn't happened yet. Elena tried to smooth it over. They're just used to managing the place, she'd say. I told myself it was an adjustment period. They were landlords, technically. They were also parents. It was messy, but maybe it would settle. Instead, it escalated. Diane began treating the house like an extension of her own. She'd comment on our decor like she had a vote. She'd criticize Elena for not hosting more. She'd ask intrusive questions about our finances with a casual smile, like it was normal dinner conversation. One night, she said, "So are you two actually saving? Or are you still doing the takeout thing?" I remember looking at Elena, waiting for her to push back. Elena just tightened her smile and said, "We're fine, Mom." After that, Diane started slipping in comments that were sharper. "If you were living somewhere else, a landlord wouldn't tolerate that. Well, if you two ever break up, I guess we'll have to see who stays and who goes." She said that last one with a laugh, like it was a joke. It didn't land like one. I tried to address it calmly. I'm not a yeller. I don't slam doors. My instincts are to document, de-escalate, and solve, so I proposed boundaries. I suggested we ask for 24 hours notice before visits unless it was an emergency. I suggested we communicate repairs by text or email, so nobody forgot what was agreed. I even offered to handle minor repairs myself to reduce their need to come over. Diane reacted like I'd insulted her character. "So now we need permission to see our own daughter." Mark's face went stiff, and he said, "We're not strangers, Ryan. Don't treat us like tenants or intruders." That line stuck with me because it flipped everything. I wasn't the one blurring roles, they were, but somehow I was the problem for wanting the roles to be clear. After that conversation, the atmosphere changed. The visits didn't stop, they became pointed. Diane would show up, look around like she was searching for evidence, and then make passive comments. "I hope you're keeping the place clean. This isn't an apartment complex where nobody cares." Mark started sending texts about maintenance responsibilities with this formal tone, like he was building a record. Elena was stuck in the middle. I could see it wearing on her. She loved her parents, but she also loved me, and she wanted peace more than she wanted to admit there was a serious problem. Then, early last spring, Elena and I made a decision that should have been simple. We wanted to buy our own home. Interest rates were ugly, but our savings were finally solid. We were tired of feeling watched. We wanted a place where if we painted a wall, nobody's mother took it personally. We didn't even make it dramatic. We told them at dinner, carefully. "We're thinking of buying later this year," Elena said. "We're starting to look." Diane's fork paused midair. Mark leaned back and asked, "Why?" Elena blinked. "Because we want a house that's ours." Diane's smile looked glued on. "But you already have a house." I spoke up, calm. "We're grateful for this place, but we want something long-term, and we'd like a little more independence." That's when Diane's tone shifted from sugary to cold. "Independence," she repeated like it was a suspicious word. "So this is about us?" "No," Elena said quickly. "It's just normal." Mark set his napkin down. "If you're leaving, we need to talk about timelines. We can't just have the house empty whenever it's convenient." That part was fair. A landlord needs notice. So I asked, "What does the lease require for notice?" And that's when I realized something crucial. We had never actually signed a formal lease. There had been talk of one. There had been vague references, but in practice what happened was this. Mark had emailed Elena a PDF labeled rental agreement right after we moved in. Elena told me about it, said her dad wanted it on file. I asked to see it. She searched her email. Couldn't find it. Mark later said, "Oh, I'll resend it." And then somehow it never became a priority because we were busy unpacking, working, living. We paid rent every month by bank transfer. We had receipts. We had texts discussing a rent amount. But an actual signed lease, not that I could recall. And I definitely hadn't signed anything physically or digitally. So when Mark and Diane acted like there was a clear contract with strict terms, my stomach tightened. I didn't accuse them. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "If there's a lease, I'd like a copy so we can follow it correctly." Diane's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Of course there's a lease." Mark nodded once. "We'll send it." That night, Elena told me I was being too rigid. "They're my parents," she said, rubbing her forehead. "They're not trying to trick us." "I'm not saying they are," I told her. "I'm saying we need to be clear. If there's a contract, we should both have it." A week passed. No lease. Then 2 weeks. And then on a Thursday evening, Mark showed up at our door with a manila envelope in his hand. No text. No warning. I was in my office finishing a work report. Elena was in the kitchen making pasta. I heard the knock, then the front door opened because Diane and Mark still had a key, despite our earlier boundary talk. Elena's voice went tense. "Dad," Mark said something low and firm. Elena didn't answer right away. I got up and walked into the hallway. Mark stood there like he was about to serve papers. Diane was behind him, arms folded, lips pressed together. The air felt different, heavier, official. Mark held out the envelope. "We need you to review and sign this." I took it, confused. "What is it?" Diane answered before he could. "The lease, the one you already signed." I looked at her. "I never signed a lease." Diane's smile was thin. "Yes, you did." Mark stepped forward and said, "Don't play games, Ryan. It has your signature on it." My heart beat once, hard, like it was trying to punch through my ribs, but I kept my face steady. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. At the top was a rental agreement with their names as landlords and our names as tenants. Rent amount, terms, clauses, and on the signature page there it was, my name, written in a clean digital script. It looked like an e-signature. And underneath it, dated months earlier than I expected, was a timestamp and a line that said something like, "Signed electronically." Diane watched me read it the way someone watches a judge read a verdict. "You see," she said softly, "so there will be no confusion about notice. And about the rules." I turned the page slowly, scanning. There were clauses I'd never agree to. Inspection rights with almost no notice. Fees for unauthorized alterations. Restrictions on overnight guests. Language that felt less like a rental agreement and more like a leash. My throat went dry, but my mind stayed oddly clear. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just controlling. It was a trap. And the worst part was that Elena, standing beside me, looked like she'd been punched. Her eyes kept flicking between the signature and my face, like she couldn't decide which reality to believe. I didn't say, "Your parents forged my signature." Not yet. I just looked up at Mark and Diane and asked, as evenly as I could, "When exactly did you say I signed this?" Mark didn't hesitate. "It was sent. You signed it. End of story." Diane leaned in. "So now we can move forward like adults. If you're planning to leave, you follow the lease. If you break it, there are consequences." The word consequences hung in the hallway, sharp and deliberate. Elena's voice came out small. "Mom, Dad, why are you doing this right now?" Diane's eyes flashed. "Because we're tired of being disrespected. Because this house is ours. Because you two think you can just take advantage and walk away whenever you want." I stared at the document again, at my name, in that neat electronic handwriting that looked enough like my usual signature to make doubt creep in for half a second. But I knew my habits. I knew my process. I don't sign things I haven't read. I don't sign leases without negotiating terms. And I certainly don't forget doing it. So if my name was on that page, either my memory had failed in a way it never had before, or someone was lying. And standing in my own hallway, with my wife caught between her parents and her husband, I realized I wasn't just being pressured about moving out. I was being positioned as the villain, an ungrateful tenant trying to squirm out of obligations while they held a signed document like a weapon. I folded the lease carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and took a slow breath. "Okay," I said. "Then the first thing we do is verify it." "Okay," I said. "Then the first thing we do is verify it." Diane let out a sharp little laugh like I'd just announced I wanted to verify gravity. Mark's voice stayed flat. "There's nothing to verify. It's signed. I'm not calling you a liar," I said, keeping my tone steady on purpose. "I'm saying, if an e-signature was used, there's an audit trail. A report. It will show how it was signed, when, and what steps were taken. That protects everyone." Elena looked between us, hope and dread mixing on her face. "Ryan, I just want facts," I said softly to her. Then I looked at Mark. "Who sent it? What platform?" Mark didn't answer immediately, and in that pause I felt something shift. If this was innocent, he'd say, "I sent it through X, here's the email." Simple. Instead, Diane answered for him, too fast. "Why does that matter?" she said. "It's signed. You're stalling." "I'm not stalling," I said. "I'm clarifying. If I signed it, the report will confirm that, and I'll follow the lease terms. If I didn't sign it, we're not moving 1 inch based on a forged signature." The word forged made Elena inhale sharply. Mark's jaw tightened. Diane's voice turned icy. "Don't you dare accuse us in our daughter's house." I corrected her without raising my voice. "In the house we pay rent for, yes." Mark stepped forward, and I could see he wanted to loom, to make it about dominance. Ryan, you can either do this the easy way or the hard way. Elena finally found her voice. Dad, stop. This is getting out of control, Diane snapped. Elena, stay out of it. Elena stared at her mother like she'd been slapped. Stay out of it. I'm your daughter. He's my husband. What are you doing? Diane's face softened for 1 second. Performance, not emotion, and then hardened again. We're protecting what's ours. I held the envelope at my side. Send me the e-sign details, the transaction ID, the email chain, anything. Otherwise, we're done talking tonight. Mark opened his mouth to argue, but Elena cut in, voice trembling but firm. Dad, if you have nothing to hide, just send it. Mark looked at Elena the way a man looks at a door that won't open the way he expects. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Diane followed, and before she left, she looked me straight in the eye. This attitude, she said quietly, this is why you'll never be family. The door shut. The silence afterward wasn't relief. It was a new kind of pressure, like the house itself was holding its breath. Elena stood there, hands clenched at her sides. Ryan, she whispered, did you ever sign something and forget? I didn't get angry. I didn't blame her for asking. She was caught in the oldest trap in the world, family versus reality. No, I said, I didn't sign it. And if I'm wrong, the report will prove it. But I'm not wrong. She swallowed hard. My mom wouldn't. She would if she thought it would control you, I said gently. And your dad would go along if he thought it was protecting the property. Elena's eyes filled, but she blinked it back. What do we do? I set the envelope on the kitchen table like it was evidence. Because it was. We verify, I said again. Then we decide what we're dealing with. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was panicking, but because my mind was already working through the steps like a checklist. E-sign platforms don't just slap a signature on a PDF and call it a day. They keep logs, device information, IP addresses, timestamps down to the second, sometimes geolocation estimates, email delivery records, authentication steps, like whether a text code was sent, whether someone clicked a link, whether they typed a name, whether they drew a signature, whether they used a saved signature style. If my name was on that lease, there had to be a trail. The next morning before work, I made coffee and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. Elena sat across from me in silence, wrapped in a cardigan like she was cold even though the heat was on. First thing I did was inspect the lease itself. The signature on the page wasn't a scanned image. It looked like a generated script, one of those fonts e-sign services use when someone types their name and chooses a style. Under it was a signed by Ryan line with a timestamp. What I needed was the platform name, an envelope ID, or a certificate page, anything that could point to the audit record. I flipped through the pages carefully. Sometimes there's a footer with a transaction number. Sometimes there's a tiny logo or verification URL. This document had small print at the bottom of the signature page. This document was signed electronically. No logo, no URL. Which told me something else. It had been edited or intentionally stripped down. That wasn't proof of fraud by itself, but it was strange. Most completed e-sign documents come with a certificate of completion attached. Do you have an email from your dad about this? I asked Elena. She stared at the mug in her hands. He sends so many emails, and Mom texts more than she breathes. I know, I said, but try. Search your inbox for signed, agreement, lease, document, anything. She nodded, opened her phone and started searching with shaky fingers. I did my own search too, not in my inbox because I already knew the answer. If I'd been the signer, I would have received an email saying a document was waiting for my signature. I had nothing like that, but I checked anyway just to be thorough. No invitation, no completion notice, no certificate. Then I remembered something important. When we moved in, Diane had insisted that everything should go through Elena, since it's her family. At the time, it sounded like convenience. Now it sounded like strategy. If Mark sent the signature request to Elena's email and made it look like it was for Ryan, Diane could claim Ryan signed it while keeping the entire process on their side of the family. Ryan, Elena said suddenly, I found something. She turned her phone toward me. An email subject line. Completed. Rental agreement. The sender name looked like an e-sign provider. The date. Months ago. My stomach tightened. Open it. She tapped it. The email included a view document button and a line that said something like, your document has been completed. There was also a reference number, an envelope ID. My brain went cold and clear again. That's it, I said. That's the thread. Elena frowned. But it came to me. Exactly, I said. And that matters. She scrolled down. The email listed recipients. My name was there. Elena's name was there. Mark's name was there. But the delivery address for me, the actual email, was not my email. It was Elena's. Elena's face drained of color as she saw it. Why would they put my email under your name? I didn't answer immediately because I wanted to be careful. I didn't want to throw accusations like knives. I wanted Elena to arrive at the conclusion herself, because she had to live with that truth. I pointed at the recipient section. This tells us how they set it up. Whoever prepared the document mapped my name to your email address, so every link that was for me went to you. Elena's voice went small. So when it said Ryan needs to sign, it would still come to me. Yes, I said. And if Diane had access to your phone or your laptop at any point? No, Elena said quickly, then stopped. Her eyes shifted away. I mean, she knows my passcode. There it was. Not evil hacking. Not movie-level theft. Just family access. The kind people hand over willingly because they think love means there are no locks. Elena's hands started shaking again. She's used my phone before, to take pictures or look something up. I never thought. I covered her hand with mine. We don't know exactly what happened yet. We're still verifying. But we have a path now. I clicked the View Document button from the email on Elena's phone, then asked her to forward it to me so I could open it on my laptop without messing anything up. When the link opened, it took me to a completed document page. There it was again, the lease, fully executed. And right there, in smaller text, was what I'd been looking for, Certificate of Completion. I clicked. A new PDF loaded with a summary, document name, completion timestamp, and an audit trail section. It listed events like a timeline: sent, viewed, signed, completed. Some platforms include more, some include a lot more, like IP and device info on a separate detailed report. This certificate alone wasn't enough to prove everything, but it was the doorway. I scrolled slowly, taking screenshots for my own records. I wasn't doing this for drama. I was doing it because if this turned legal, I wanted everything preserved. Time, date, source, original email headers if needed. Elena watched my screen like it was a medical scan showing something she didn't want to see. Is it really possible?" she asked. "That my mom did this?" "I don't know yet," I said, "but I know this. Nobody can claim an e-sign is unquestionable and then refuse to show the verification. The verification is the whole point." I saved the certificate PDF, then looked for a download audit trail option. There was one, but it required the sender's permission to access full details. Of course it did. I leaned back, exhaled slowly, and tried to keep frustration from rising. "They set it up so only the sender can pull the detailed report," I said. Elena's face tightened. "So we're stuck?" "No," I said, "we're not stuck. It just means we do this the right way." I opened a new tab and searched the provider's support page: Request Audit Trail, Dispute Signature, Certificate of Completion IP address. There it was, instructions for requesting a detailed e-signature report, often called an envelope history or signature audit trail, including IP address, device, and authentication steps. But the dispute process usually required either the sender to cooperate or a formal request, sometimes through customer support, sometimes through legal channels. I didn't like sometimes. I liked guaranteed. So I called a friend of mine from work, Jasmine, who specialized in security compliance. I didn't dump the whole story, just the technical problem. "I need to prove a signature wasn't mine," I said. "E-sign platform. How do I get the metadata if the sender won't cooperate?" There was a pause. Then Jasmine said, "You preserve everything you have. You pull email headers. You get the envelope ID. Then you either go through their dispute process or you get an attorney to send a preservation letter and request records. Most platforms keep logs. Logs like IP and device fingerprint," I asked. "Usually," she said. "At least IP and timestamps. Sometimes browser user agent. Depends. But if it's a reputable provider, they'll have a certificate and event history." I looked at Elena, then at my screen. "I have the envelope ID," I said. "Good," Jasmine replied. "Then don't argue emotionally with your in-laws. Force them into a factual corner, and do not sign anything new." When I hung up, Elena was still sitting there, arms wrapped around herself. "I feel stupid," she said. "You're not," I told her. "You're human, and you trusted your parents. That's not stupid." She swallowed. "What if this ruins everything?" It already changed everything, I said quietly. We're just finally looking at it. That afternoon, Mark texted Elena. Not me. Elena, like always. Need your decision by Monday. Lease is clear. If you refuse to comply, we will proceed. No greeting. No hope you're well. Just pressure. Elena showed me the message with a look that was half apology, half fear. I took her phone, typed calmly, and handed it back for her to send from her own number. We are verifying the e-signature. Please provide the platform name, envelope ID, and full audit report showing IP, device, timestamps, and authentication steps. Mark replied within 2 minutes. You already have the lease. Stop making accusations. Elena's eyes flashed. That's not an accusation. That's literally proof. I nodded. And he knows it. Then Diane chimed in from her own number. Elena, your husband is filling your head with nonsense. We are not playing these games. If you want to stay in this family, you will stop this disrespect. I watched Elena read it. Her face hardened in a way I hadn't seen before. Not anger, clarity. She typed back. If you want to be respected, prove it's legitimate. The response from Diane was immediate. This is our house. We can have you removed. I felt my chest tighten, but not with fear, more like recognition. The mask was slipping. This wasn't about rent or a lease. It was about control, obedience, and punishment for daring to plan a future without their permission. That evening, I took every piece of documentation we had and created a folder. Bank transfers, text messages about rent, screenshots of their threats, the lease PDF, the certificate of completion, the email chain. Then I did something else. I booked a consult with a tenant attorney. It wasn't because I planned to sue immediately. It was because I refused to walk into a trap blind. The attorney, a calm woman named Laura, listened to the basics and asked one question that made my skin prickle. Who owns the property? She said. Mark and Diane, I answered. And do you have any written agreement you both actually signed knowingly? She asked. Not that I recall, I said, but they produced one with my electronic signature. Laura's tone sharpened slightly. If you didn't sign it, that's serious. You need the audit trail and you need to respond in writing that you dispute the authenticity. Also, do not have verbal arguments about it. Everything in writing. I glanced at Elena, who was listening from the couch, knees pulled to her chest. Laura continued. In most states, they can't just remove you without going through legal eviction procedures, but the faster you establish a documented dispute, the better. And if there's forgery, that changes the dynamic. After the call, I sat at my desk and drafted an email to Mark and Diane. Polite, professional, no emotion. Subject: dispute of signature authenticity. Request for e-signature audit report. I stated that I dispute signing the lease, that I request the full audit report including IP address, device information, authentication steps, and timestamps, and that until verification is provided, we will not accept the document as valid. I sent it. Then I went back to the eSign platform support page and started the dispute process using the envelope ID we had from Elena's email. It asked for details. It asked for the reason. It asked for supporting documents. I attached the certificate, the email showing my name mapped to Elena's email, and my statement disputing the signature. At the end, it gave me a confirmation number and a message. Thank you. Our team will review your request. That was it. No immediate download. No instant revelation. Just waiting. Waiting was the part Diane and Mark thought would break me. They thought pressure plus time equals surrender. But I didn't feel like surrendering. I felt like I was tightening a net, because now there was a record outside the family, outside their control where the truth would live. And the next morning, when I opened my email and saw a new message from the eSign provider's dispute team with the subject line "Additional verification required," my stomach dropped in a way that told me we were finally getting close. The email from the eSign provider wasn't dramatic. It didn't accuse anyone. It didn't say fraud detected. It just said additional verification required to proceed with a signature dispute. Please confirm the following. 1. Your identity, government-issued ID. 2. Your relationship to the document listed signer. 3. The email address and phone number you typically use. 4. The approximate date time you believe the document was signed without your authorization. I read it twice, then called Elena into my office. This is good, I told her, turning the laptop so she could see. They're taking it seriously. Elena leaned in, hair still damp from her shower, eyes tired. Or it means they're going to drag this out. They might, I said, but there's a process, and processes leave records. We spent the next hour doing the unglamorous work of protecting ourselves. I scanned my driver's license, took a photo holding it next to my face like the email requested, and drafted a clean response. I included my real email address and phone number, the ones I've used for years. I explained that I never received a signature request to my email, and that my name had been associated with Elena's email in the envelope. Then I added the one thing I knew would matter. I asked them to preserve all metadata related to the envelope, including IP addresses, device fingerprints, authentication logs, and any recipient mapping changes. I hit send, and immediately after my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Final notice, vacate in 7 days or we file. No signature, no name, but I knew who it was. Diane had that way of weaponizing anonymity, sending messages that were just vague enough to deny later. I showed Elena, and I watched her go still. "That's my mom," she whispered. "You recognize the tone," I said. Elena nodded once, slow. "She's escalating because she's scared, or because she thinks we'll fold," I said. "We're not folding." The next day, a paper notice appeared taped to our front door. Not slid under it, not mailed properly. Taped, like a public shaming. Notice to quit in bold at the top. It stated we were in violation of the lease terms and must vacate. It cited clauses I'd read the night before, the ones about inspections, unauthorized alterations, and something that made my jaw clench. Hostile conduct toward landlord. Hostile conduct, because I asked for an audit report. Elena stood beside me on the porch, reading over my shoulder. When she got to that line, she let out a broken laugh that turned into a sob she tried to swallow down. "This is insane," she said, voice shaking. "We haven't done anything." "I know," I said, peeling the notice off the door. "They're building a narrative." Inside, I scanned it and added it to the folder. Then I called Laura, the tenant attorney, and forwarded her everything. She replied within an hour. "Do not leave voluntarily based solely on this notice. They still must file and serve properly. Keep all communications. Also stop interacting in person if possible. Written only." That was the legal side. The emotional side was uglier. Because that night, Elena's brother Kyle called. Kyle is 32, charming in a lazy way, and always seemed to float through life with a safety net made of his parents' approval. He'd never been outright cruel to me, but he'd also never challenged Diane and Mark. He laughed at their jokes. He kept himself in the good graces. That was his strategy. He didn't bother with small talk. "Dude," he said, "what are you doing?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "My parents are freaking out," he said. "Mom's crying. Dad says you're threatening them with legal stuff." I kept my voice calm. "Kyle, I'm not threatening them. I'm asking them to prove a lease signature is real." There was a pause. Then Kyle said, "Okay, but why would they forge it?" "I'm not saying they did," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I'm saying the document claims I signed it electronically, and I didn't, so we're verifying." Kyle exhaled, frustrated. "Ryan, you're turning this into a war." "No," I said. "They turned it into a war when they tried to kick us out with a document I never signed." Kyle's voice sharpened. "They said you're disrespectful, that you're controlling Elena." I felt something hot flash in my chest, but I kept my tone level. "Ask Elena if I'm controlling her." "I'm calling you," Kyle said, "because I'm trying to keep this from blowing up." "It's already blown up," I said. "If you want to help, tell your parents to send the audit report." Kyle lowered his voice. "Dad says you're making that up, that an e-sign is an e-sign." I almost laughed. Almost. "Kyle," I said, "you ever buy a car online? Sign anything digitally at work?" "Yeah," he said. "Then you know there's always a record," I said. "If your dad insists there isn't, he's either ignorant or lying." Kyle went quiet. Then he said, "Listen, off the record, Mom has always handled the paperwork for that house." That line landed like a weight. "Elena told me your mom has access to her phone," I said. "Does she?" Kyle hesitated. "I mean, she's my mom. She has everyone's passwords. She says it's for emergencies." "Right," I said. "Emergencies." Kyle didn't respond. Then he muttered, "Just be careful. Dad's not joking about eviction." When I hung up, Elena was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, having heard enough to know what the call was about. "He thinks I'm being controlled," she said bitterly. "He's repeating what your mom told him," I said. Elena shook her head. "I grew up in that house. I know how this works. Mom tells a story. Dad backs it. Kyle stays safe." She walked past me into the kitchen and opened a cabinet too hard, just to have something to do with her hands. "I hate that I still want them to call and apologize," she said, voice thick. I hate that part of me keeps thinking if I just explain better, they'll understand. I leaned against the counter. They understand. They just don't agree with you having a life they can't manage. That night, we sat at the kitchen table and did what married couples do when they stop pretending everything is fine. We talked about worst-case scenarios. If they filed for eviction, we'd respond. If they shut off utilities illegally, we'd document and report it. If they tried to enter without notice, we'd change the locks, but we'd do it with legal guidance because I wasn't about to give them another violation to cite. Elena looked at me across the table. What if the audit report comes back and it somehow shows you signed? Then I'll own it, I said. But it won't, and if it does, we still move out and never take another family favor again. She nodded slowly, then whispered, if it proves they forged it, what do we do? That question hung there, because proving it would be both relief and grief. It would mean Elena's parents weren't just difficult, they were willing to fabricate reality. I don't know yet, I admitted, but we'll decide together. 3 days passed. No response from Mark or Diane to my email. No audit report, just more pressure. Mark left a voicemail on Elena's phone. His voice was controlled, almost bored. Elena, tell Ryan we'll be filing if he doesn't stop. This is getting ridiculous. We have a signed lease. We have rights. Diane texted Elena a photo of the lease signature page, zoomed in on my name like it was a trophy. This is your husband's signature. He's lying to you. Elena stared at the image for a long time, then deleted it. I can't keep doing this, she said. It feels like they're trying to make me choose. They are, I said. The 4th morning, I got another email from the e-sign provider. Thank you for completing identity verification. We have opened a formal investigation. Please note, in order to release detailed audit information, we may require either A, authorization from the account holder/sender, or B, a legal request. However, we can confirm whether standard authentication was completed and whether recipient email mapping matched signer identity. It was both good news and a wall. They could confirm inconsistencies, but to get the full IP device breakdown, the smoking gun, we might need legal leverage. I forwarded it to Laura immediately. She replied, this is typical. Next step is a preservation letter plus potential subpoena if necessary. But sometimes the confirmation of mismatched email mapping is enough to stop an eviction attempt. Stop an eviction attempt, not stop the betrayal. That afternoon, I took another step. I pulled the full email headers from Elena's completed email and saved them. Headers show routing information, sender servers, sometimes originating IP, and they're harder to dispute than screenshots. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was more structure, more data, more factual weight. While I was doing that, Elena's phone buzzed again. A group text. Diane, Mark, Kyle, Elena. Diane, we need to meet tonight. No lawyers, no computers, just family. Mark, if you refuse, we proceed. Simple. Kyle, Elena, please just talk to them. Elena stared at the screen, then looked at me. No computers, she said softly. They want to corner us. They want to isolate you, I corrected. Elena's eyes hardened again. I'll talk to them, but not alone, and not here. I hesitated. Laura said written only. I know, Elena said, but if I don't show up, they'll tell everyone I'm brainwashed. I want to look them in the eye. I want to hear them say it. So we chose a neutral place. A busy coffee shop near a shopping center. Public. Cameras. People around. Diane and Mark arrived 10 minutes early, seated at a table like they'd reserved judgment. Kyle was there too, looking uncomfortable, tapping his foot. Diane stood when Elena approached, arms open for a hug that wasn't really a hug, it was a performance of motherhood. Elena didn't step into it. Diane's face tightened, but she recovered fast. Sit down. We sat. Mark didn't order anything. Diane had a latte she kept stirring without drinking. Kyle had a bottled water. Diane wasted no time. This has to stop, she said, looking at Elena, not me. This obsession with proving something. It's embarrassing. Elena kept her voice steady. Then prove it's legitimate. Mark finally looked at me. We don't have to prove anything. The document is signed. I nodded once. E-signatures have audit trails. Diane's eyes flashed. There you go again with the audit trails, like you're some FBI agent. It's not FBI, I said. It's standard. And the provider already confirmed something. The signer email mapping didn't match my real email. Kyle's head lifted sharply. What? Mark's face twitched just a fraction. Elena leaned forward. What does that mean, Dad? Mark's voice stayed too calm. It means Ryan never gave us his email. So we used yours. That's all. I watched Diane closely as he said it. Her hand froze mid-stir. Elena blinked. You used my email for Ryan's signature. Diane set the spoon down with a soft clink. Elena, don't be dramatic. It was easier. You handle the house stuff. Elena's voice rose, just slightly. So a signature request meant for my husband went to me. Yes, Diane said, like that was normal. And you both agreed to live there. So what difference does it make? I felt Kyle shift beside Diane, suddenly alert. Elena's cheeks flushed. It makes a difference because you're saying Ryan signed something he never saw. Mark's voice sharpened. He saw it. He just doesn't want to follow it now. Elena turned to Kyle. Do you hear this? Kyle looked at Mark, then Diane, then Elena. I mean, it's weird, he admitted. Why not just send it to Ryan? Diane snapped. Because it's not your business. Kyle flinched and went quiet again. I kept my voice calm, but my words were firm. If it was just easier, you can request the full audit report right now and show the IP address and device used to sign. That ends this. Mark stared at me. No. One word. Flat. Absolute. Elena's eyes widened. Why not? Mark leaned back. Because we don't have to. Because it's our property. Because we're tired of being treated like criminals. Diane leaned toward Elena, voice low and dangerous. And because if you keep choosing him over us, you will regret it. That was the moment the coffee shop noise seemed to fade. I saw Elena's breath catch. I saw the old fear in her shoulders, conditioned, familiar. Then I saw something else rise in her face. Anger, finally, clean and undeniable. You're not my victim, Elena said. And you're not entitled to my life. Diane's eyes glittered. So you're leaving the family. Elena's voice didn't shake. If this is what family means, you already left me first. Mark stood, chair scraping. Fine. 7 days. He turned to go. But before he walked away, I said, You're making a mistake. Mark looked back. No, you are. And Diane, as she grabbed her purse, leaned down and hissed to Elena, When this ends, don't come crying to me. They walked out. Kyle stayed seated, staring at his hands. Elena watched them leave like she was watching a door close on her childhood. Kyle finally spoke, barely audible. I didn't know they were doing that. Elena looked at him. Do you believe us now? Kyle swallowed. I don't know what to believe. But, Dad refusing the report? That's not normal. No, I said quietly. It isn't. Kyle looked at me then, and for the first time he seemed less like Diane's son, and more like a man realizing the ground under him wasn't solid. Ryan, he said, if Mom did sign it, how would she even… I didn't interrupt. I let him finish. Kyle shook his head. She wouldn't, right? Elena's voice softened, but it carried a new hardness underneath. Kyle, Mom has lied to keep control our entire lives. She just usually lies about feelings, not documents. Kyle's eyes went wet. What do you want me to do? Elena stared at him for a long second. Tell me the truth, she said. Has Mom ever signed something for Dad, or for you? Kyle hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. He didn't answer. Not yet. And as we drove home, Elena sat in silence, staring out the window. Halfway there, my phone buzzed with a new email notification from the e-sign provider. Subject line, Investigation Update, Preliminary Findings. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Because whatever was in that email, whether it was enough to stop an eviction or enough to prove a forgery, was about to change the entire power balance in this family. When we got home, I didn't even take my shoes off. I went straight to my desk and opened the email. Elena stood behind me, arms wrapped around herself like she was bracing for impact. The message was short, written in that careful corporate tone that says everything without sounding like it's saying anything. Preliminary findings indicate that the email address used for recipient Ryan last name did not match previously known signer contact information provided in your verification response. Additionally, the signing event appears to have been completed without multi-factor authentication. Further details may require authorization from the account holder or a formal legal request. I read it twice, then turned to Elena. They're confirming the mismatch, I said, and no multi-factor. Elena stared. So, it really wasn't you. It points strongly that way, I said. They're basically saying the document was set up so Ryan could be signed through your email link, with no text code or identity check. Elena's mouth opened and closed, like she didn't know what emotion to choose first. My mom had my phone code for years. I stood up and faced her. This doesn't prove who did it yet, but it proves the setup was wrong, and Mark refusing the report makes even less sense now. Elena sank onto the couch, hands pressed to her temples. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. Breathe. We're going to handle this step by step. She let out a shaky breath. They're going to actually file, aren't they? Probably, I said. They want to scare us into leaving, but now we're not just arguing feelings. We have a third-party provider saying something is off. That night, we did two things. First, I emailed Mark and Diane again. Same calm tone, slightly firmer language. I attached the e-sign provider's preliminary findings and wrote, "As you can see, the e-sign provider has identified a mismatch in signer contact information and absence of MFA. Please provide the full audit report, IP address, device info, timestamps, authentication steps. If you do not, we will consider this document disputed and will respond accordingly to any eviction filing." Second, we stopped playing defense in our own home. We replaced the front and back door locks. I didn't do it as a dramatic gesture. I did it as a safety measure. Legally, Laura told us it was risky without notice to the landlord, so we did it properly. I sent Mark and Diane a written message that locks were changed due to unauthorized entries and that they could request access with 24-hour notice for legitimate maintenance. I offered to be present for any entry. I knew they'd call it hostile, but I also knew they couldn't keep walking into our home like it was a storage unit. Mark responded within minutes. "You have no right to change locks on my property. This is a violation." I replied, "Unauthorized entry is a violation. Written notice required. We will cooperate with legitimate maintenance requests." Diane didn't message me. She messaged Elena. "You chose him. Enjoy being homeless." Elena didn't respond. She put her phone face down on the table like it was poison. 2 days later we were served. Not in an official dramatic way, no sheriff at the door, but an envelope was left taped to our mailbox with court written in thick marker. Inside was a filing notice. An eviction action had been initiated. It cited lease violations, non-compliance, and refusal to vacate after notice. Elena read it, then looked at me, eyes wide. "They really did it," she whispered. "They're taking us to court." I took it from her gently. "Okay, then we answer." She looked like she was waiting for me to say something comforting. Something like, "It'll be fine." I didn't lie. "This is going to be stressful," I said. "But this is also where their bluff ends. Courts like documents, timelines, evidence, and if that lease is fraudulent, they're walking into a fire with gasoline." Elena swallowed. "They're my parents." "I know," I said. "That's why it hurts. But it doesn't change what they're doing." We met with Laura the next morning. She reviewed the filing, then asked for everything. Texts, emails, bank transfers, the e-sign certificate, the provider's preliminary findings. She leaned back in her chair and said, "They're relying heavily on this lease. Because without it," I said, "we're month-to-month tenants with a basic notice period and no crazy clauses." "Exactly," Laura said. "And if the lease signature is disputed, the court will care about the authenticity. Here's what we do. We file a formal answer denying the allegations. We attach the provider's findings, and we request discovery." "Discovery," Elena repeated like it was a foreign word. Laura nodded. "It means we can request evidence from them, original files, communications, the e-sign records, and we can subpoena the e-sign provider for the detailed audit trail if needed." Elena's hands clenched. "So my parents will have to explain this." Laura's expression didn't change, but her tone softened. "Yes, in a setting where because I said so doesn't work." Walking out of that office, Elena looked both terrified and strangely steadier. "This is real now," she said. "It's been real," I replied. "Now it's documented." That evening, Kyle showed up at our house. He didn't have a key. He had to knock like everyone else. That alone was a shift. I opened the door and saw him standing on the porch with his hands shoved in his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched. His face was pale. "Elena here?" he asked. Elena appeared behind me, and Kyle's eyes flicked over her like he was checking if she was okay. "I'm here," she said. "What do you want?" Kyle glanced toward the street, like he was afraid someone would see him. "Can I come in?" Elena hesitated, then stepped aside. Kyle walked into the living room and stood there awkwardly, not sitting, not moving, like he didn't deserve comfort. "I'm not here to fight," he said quickly. "I'm here because I think I know what happened." Elena's breath caught. "Kyle." He rubbed his face with his hands. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. I stayed quiet. Elena stayed quiet. We let him talk. Kyle looked at Elena. "Mom asked me last year if you still use the same phone passcode." Elena's eyebrows pulled together. What? Kyle nodded fast, like he wanted to spit it out before he lost nerve. She said she needed it for emergency contact stuff, and I was like, why would you need Elena's passcode? And she said because she forgets things and I'm her mother. Elena's voice came out thin. That doesn't… Kyle cut in. It gets worse. A few months ago, Mom was at my place and she was on her laptop and she was practicing signatures. Elena stared. Practicing signatures. Kyle swallowed. Like those e-sign things, where you can type a name and it turns into script. She was clicking through options. My stomach tightened. I could see Elena's face changing, piece by piece, like a building cracking. Kyle continued. I asked what she was doing. She snapped at me, told me to mind my own business. Then she said she was updating rental paperwork, and Dad didn't understand technology. Elena's eyes went wet. So she did it. Kyle shook his head, miserable. I don't have proof. But Elena, she's been doing stuff like this forever. She signs things for Dad. She signs his name on birthday cards. She signs his name on school forms. She thinks it's normal because they're married. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, and a sound escaped her that wasn't quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Those aren't leases. Kyle nodded helplessly. I know. He looked at me then, and his voice dropped. And Dad knows, not all the details, but he knows enough. He doesn't ask because it's convenient. Elena's shoulders shook once, like she'd been hit from the inside. So they're both doing it, she whispered. And they're using me. Kyle stepped forward. I'm sorry. Elena's eyes flashed. Sorry doesn't fix it. They filed an eviction against me. Against my husband. Kyle flinched. I know. That's why I'm here. I can help. I finally spoke. How? Kyle hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Mom texted me last week, after you guys asked for the audit report. She was freaking out. He held the phone out to Elena. Read it. Elena took it with shaking hands and scrolled. I watched her eyes move across the screen. Her lips parted slightly. Then she looked up at me, face pale. What? I asked gently. Elena turned the phone toward me. On the screen was Diane's message to Kyle. If Ryan keeps pushing, we'll make him look crazy. The lease is signed. Courts don't care how. I felt something cold spread through my chest. Not fear, certainty. Courts don't care how. That was a person who believed the appearance of legitimacy mattered more than truth. Elena scrolled further. Another message. Tell Elena to stop. She always caves. If she doesn't, we'll cut her off. Kyle's voice was raw. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to do. I'm not built for this. Elena handed his phone back like it burned her. I was built for it, she said softly. My whole life. That's the problem. Kyle looked between us. If you want, I can give Laura those screenshots. I can sign something. I can testify. Elena stared at her brother. Would you? Kyle nodded, eyes shiny. Yeah, because this is wrong. I didn't trust it fully yet. I wasn't cynical, but I was careful. People raised in Diane's world didn't flip overnight without consequences. But I could see in Kyle's face that he was scared. Not of us, but of her. Okay, I said. Then we do it properly. You send those messages to Elena so she can forward them to our attorney. And you don't tell your parents you did it. Kyle exhaled shakily. They'll kill me. Elena's voice was flat. They can't kill what they don't own. Kyle left after that, quieter than he arrived. Elena locked the door behind him and leaned her forehead against it for a moment. Then she turned around and looked at me with a kind of exhausted resolve. I'm done protecting them, she said. I'm done. That sentence, more than the court papers, felt like the true turning point. The next day, Laura filed our response. She attached the e-sign provider's preliminary findings, included our dispute confirmation number, and noted that we were requesting the full audit trail through formal legal process. Then Laura sent a formal preservation letter to the e-sign provider, demanding they retain all logs and metadata associated with the envelope and signing event. It wasn't flashy. It was just leverage. 2 days after that, the e-sign provider responded directly to Laura's office. They still wouldn't hand over full IP device logs without a subpoena, but they confirmed something that made my pulse jump. The signing event was completed from a device and location inconsistent with my verified information. They didn't say where. They didn't say what device. But they confirmed inconsistent, which meant not me. Laura called me and Elena on speaker. This is enough to pressure them, she said. If we push for a subpoena, it will get ugly for them. Often the moment they realize the audit report will be exposed, they back down. Elena laughed once, bitter. They don't back down. They punish. They might hear, Laura said, because punishment isn't the same as perjury. The court hearing date was set for the following week. In the days leading up to it, Mark and Diane went silent. No texts, no calls, no threats. That silence wasn't peace. It was planning. And then, the night before our hearing, an email landed in Elena's inbox from Mark. Subject, settlement offer. Elena opened it with trembling hands. Mark wrote that if we agreed to vacate within 10 days, they would withdraw the case and waive any fees. He framed it like mercy, like they were being generous. But what caught my eye was one line at the bottom. Please confirm acceptance by signing the attached agreement. Another e-sign link. Elena looked at me with disbelief. They're doing it again. I stared at the screen, then at the attachment. It was a mutual termination agreement. And it wasn't mutual. It had language that said we admitted breach, that we agreed the lease was valid, that we waived claims. They weren't offering peace. They were trying to force a confession. I felt my jaw clench. They're trying to lock you into their narrative before court, I said. And if you sign that, you lose the right to challenge the lease. Elena's hands shook. I'm not signing anything. Good, I said, because tomorrow we let the report speak. Elena looked at me, eyes wide. Do we have it? Not yet, I said honestly, but we have enough to force it. And if your parents think they can win without the audit trail, they're about to learn something. That night, I lay awake listening to Elena's breathing beside me. I kept thinking about one simple fact. If the lease was legitimate, they would welcome the audit report like a shield. If it wasn't, they'd fear it like a knife. And the next morning, as we walked into the courthouse with Laura, Elena's grip tight on my hand, my phone buzzed with a new email from the e-sign provider's legal compliance team. Subject, response to subpoena inquiry, audit report available upon service. I showed it to Laura. She nodded once. Calm. Good, she said. Now we see how brave they are when the truth has a timestamp. Inside the courthouse, everything felt smaller than I expected. The hallways, the courtroom, the wooden benches. The stress was still there, but it had a different texture. At home, Diane and Mark's control filled every room. Here, their power had to fit into a file folder. Laura checked us in, then guided Elena and me to a bench outside the courtroom. People sat around us murmuring, flipping through paperwork, avoiding eye contact. A few feet away, Mark and Diane appeared with their own attorney, an older man in a gray suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Diane's eyes locked on Elena first, not me. She gave her a tight smile that was supposed to look calm, but I could see it wasn't. Mark didn't look at us at all. Kyle wasn't with them. That mattered more than Diane wanted it to. We were called in. We stood when the judge entered, then sat. The judge was a woman in her 50s with glasses and a tired, efficient expression like she'd heard every version of This Isn't Fair that existed. She didn't look interested in drama. She looked interested in facts. Mark's attorney spoke first, outlining the claim. Written lease, violations, refusal to vacate. He presented the lease as Exhibit A, emphasizing my electronic signature and their right to remove tenants who breached terms. Then it was our turn. Laura stood, calm and sharp. Your Honor, we dispute the authenticity of the lease signature attributed to my client. We have initiated a formal dispute with the e-signature provider, and we have preliminary findings indicating a mismatch between the signer identity and the recipient mapping, and a signing event inconsistent with my client's verified contact information. Diane's attorney objected immediately. Preliminary findings are hearsay. Laura nodded. We agree they're not the final audit report, Your Honor. That's why we requested discovery and why we are prepared to subpoena the provider's full e-signature audit trail, including IP address, device information, timestamps, and authentication steps. We also have evidence that the lease signature request was routed to the wife's email address under the husband's name. The judge looked up. Is that accurate? Mark's attorney shifted. The wife handled communications. The judge didn't blink. That wasn't my question. Mark's attorney glanced toward Mark. Yes, Your Honor. The document was sent to the wife's email. They are a married couple. The judge's expression tightened slightly, just enough to show she didn't like where this was going. So the document attributed to the husband was not sent to the husband's email. Mark finally looked up, face stiff. Diane's lips pressed together hard. Laura continued, and there was no multi-factor authentication. The judge turned to Mark and Diane's attorney. Do you have the audit report from the provider? He cleared his throat. We have the executed lease. I didn't ask for the lease, the judge said. I asked for the audit report. The courtroom went quiet in that sharp way. Quiet happens when adults stop pretending. Mark's attorney tried again. Your Honor, e-signatures are legally binding. They can be, the judge said, if properly executed, and if challenged, we look at evidence. Do you have the provider's certificate and audit trail? He didn't answer fast enough. Diane leaned toward him and whispered something with a rigid smile. He straightened. We do not have that report today. The judge's gaze moved to Laura. Counsel, do you have anything from the provider beyond your client's claim? Laura nodded and handed the bailiff a packet. Yes, Your Honor. The provider's dispute confirmation, the certificate of completion, and the provider's preliminary findings. We also have screenshots from a third party indicating intent to rely on the signature regardless of how it was obtained. Mark's attorney objected again, but the judge waved him off. I'll review it for limited purposes. She read for a few minutes, face unreadable. Diane sat very still, like she could freeze reality if she didn't move. Then the judge looked up again. Mr. Carter, she said, addressing Mark, you're asking this court to evict tenants based largely on a disputed signature. Yet you did not bring the verification that would resolve the dispute. Mark's voice was low. It's our house. The judge's eyes didn't soften. Ownership isn't the issue. Procedure and credibility are the issue. Mark's attorney tried to steer it back. Your Honor, even if there is a dispute, they were month to month. Laura interrupted gently. And if they are month to month, then the plaintiff's filing based on breach of lease terms is inappropriate. They cannot claim strict lease violations and simultaneously avoid proving the lease. The judge sat back. That's correct. She looked at Mark's attorney. Do you wish to proceed today without the audit trail? Mark's attorney hesitated. I could almost see him calculating risk. If he pushed and lost, it would look bad. If he withdrew, it would look suspicious. Either way, Diane's plan had already started collapsing. We request a continuance, he said. The judge didn't immediately agree. Why wasn't the audit trail requested earlier? Mark's attorney said. We were not aware the defendants would dispute the signature. Laura's voice stayed smooth. We requested verification in writing multiple times before this filing. We have those emails and texts. The judge held up a hand. I've heard enough. She looked down at her notes, then at Mark and Diane. I'm granting a short continuance solely for the plaintiffs to produce the e-sign audit trail and certificate of completion directly from the provider, or via subpoena, to establish authenticity. If you cannot, this court will not entertain eviction based on that document. Diane's head snapped up. Mark's jaw tightened. The judge added, and I strongly advise you to consider the legal consequences of presenting fraudulent documents in court. That last sentence landed like a gavel inside my chest. We walked out of the courtroom with our next date scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the hallway, Diane finally lost her composure. This is his fault, she hissed at Elena, not even trying to keep her voice down. He's poisoning you. Elena's face was pale, but her voice was steady. You could end this by showing the audit report. Mark stepped in, eyes hard. You think you're clever, he said to me. You think paperwork makes you powerful. I didn't rise to it. No, I said. Truth makes me calm. Diane laughed, brittle. Truth? You're a guest in our family. Don't forget it. Elena flinched at the word guest, like it finally confirmed what she'd always feared. In Diane's world, Elena was only family when she obeyed. That afternoon, Laura moved quickly. She drafted the subpoena paperwork and contacted the e-sign provider's legal compliance team. The provider responded with clear instructions. Serve the subpoena, include the envelope ID, specify the requested data fields. They confirmed they could produce a detailed report containing IP address at each event, sent, viewed, signed, timestamp for each action, user agent/device and browser details, authentication steps used, email link only, SMS code, Idaho check, recipient mapping, and any edits to signer contact info. Everything Diane had treated like nonsense. A week later, we had it. Not in some dramatic reveal with flashing lights. Just a PDF attached to an email from the provider's compliance team, stamped and formatted like a document that had been in courtrooms before. Laura called us into her office to go through it. Elena sat on one side of the small conference table. I sat on the other. Laura opened the report and slid a printed copy toward us. At the top, envelope summary. Document name. Rental agreement. Date created. Sender. Mark, last name. Account holder. Recipients. Elena, last name. Ryan, last name. Mark, last name. Then the timeline. Sent to Ryan, last name, at Elena's email address. Viewed from an IP address. Signed from the same IP address. Completed. The report listed the IP address plainly. It also provided an approximate geolocation, a residential ISP in our city, within a few miles. Laura turned her laptop so we could see the IP lookup she'd already done. It wasn't our home internet. It was Diane and Mark's. Elena made a sound like air leaving a tire. "No," she whispered. Laura didn't soften it. "Yes." I stared at the report, feeling my hands go cold. Not because I was shocked anymore, but because the finality of it was brutal. This wasn't a suspicion. It wasn't maybe your mom. It was an address in numbers and timestamps. Elena's eyes flooded. She wiped her cheeks quickly, angry at herself for crying. "So they signed it from their house." Laura nodded. "The report also shows no MFA. It was signed via email link only." Elena stared at one line for a long time. "Signer email for Ryan." Elena's email. Then she said, very quietly, "My mother did this." I took Elena's hand. She squeezed hard, like she needed pain to stay grounded. Laura looked at us. "We submit this to the court. The eviction claim collapses, and depending on the judge's view, there may be sanctions." Elena swallowed. "Sanctions against my parents." Laura didn't flinch. "They filed an eviction based on a document signed from their IP address under your husband's name. That's not a misunderstanding." The second hearing was shorter. Mark and Diane showed up looking like they'd been awake for 3 days. Their attorney looked grim. He approached Laura before we went in and spoke in a low voice. Laura listened, then nodded once. Inside the courtroom, Mark's attorney spoke first. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs moved to voluntarily dismiss the action." The judge looked over her glasses. "Without prejudice?" The attorney hesitated. "Yes, Your Honor." Laura stood. "We object to dismissal without prejudice. The plaintiffs initiated this action based on a disputed signature, and the subpoenaed audit report confirms the signing event occurred from the plaintiff's residential IP address, while attributed to the defendant. We request dismissal with prejudice and appropriate sanctions for bad faith filing." Mark's head turned sharply toward his attorney. Diane's face went white. The judge reviewed the audit report, silent for several minutes. Then she set it down. "Mr. and Mrs. Last name," she said, voice controlled. "This court will not be used to enforce fabricated documents. Dismissal is granted with prejudice. The plaintiffs are ordered to pay the defendant's court costs associated with responding to this filing, and I suggest you consult counsel about the seriousness of falsifying signatures." Diane opened her mouth, probably to cry or argue, but no sound came out. Mark looked like a man who'd spent his life believing authority would protect him, and just learned authority has rules. Outside the courthouse, Elena didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She just stood in the sunlight like she was trying to understand how a person grieves a living parent. Diane stormed past us, not looking at Elena. Mark followed, and for the first time he looked old, not physically, but in the eyes. He didn't say a word. In the weeks that followed, Elena and I moved out, not because we were forced, but because we refused to live in a place that came with chains. We found a small rental, owned by a property management company. Boring, professional, emotionally neutral. We signed a lease that we actually read, and I've never felt so relieved to deal with strangers. Diane sent one last message to Elena. "You humiliated us." Elena stared at it for a long time before typing back. "You humiliated yourselves, and you tried to make me complicit." Then she blocked her mother's number. Mark too. Kyle didn't get blocked. He called a few days later, voice shaky. "They're saying you destroyed the family," he said. Elena's response was calm, almost gentle. "No, Kyle. The family was already broken. I just stopped pretending it wasn't." Kyle was quiet. Then he said, "I'm sorry." "I know," Elena replied. "But sorry isn't the same as different." After that, we went quiet. Not revenge quiet, healing quiet. Some nights, Elena still mourned what she wanted her parents to be. Some mornings, I still felt anger when I thought about Diane looking me in the eye and insisting my signature was mine. But the longer time passed, the clearer the lesson became. The scariest part wasn't that they tried to evict us. The scariest part was how normal they thought it was to manufacture truth when truth didn't serve them. And the reason they almost got away with it was simple, because people assume family wouldn't do that. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: love doesn't mean access, and family doesn't mean immunity from consequences. A contract doesn't care about guilt trips. A court doesn't care about tears. A document doesn't care about who's louder at the dinner table. And sometimes, the only thing standing between you and someone else's version of reality is a single official report, an IP address, a timestamp, a device log, quiet evidence that doesn't argue back. That report didn't just save our housing situation. It saved our sanity. Because once the truth was written down in a place Diane couldn't rewrite, we finally had the freedom to do what we should have done earlier, choose our own life, and lock the door behind us.